Well, Samih al-Qassim is one of the most important poets in the Palestinian cultural pantheon. He passed away 1 year ago, but his work lives on, exemplified by an evening in Haifa devoted to his memory. Mary and Ayman Sikseck bring us moments from the tribute.
At the Al-Midan Theater in Haifa, the crowd was overwhelmed with emotion as the city marked the first memorial of the passing of the great local poet, Samih al-Qassim.
The love we've received since his passing from our people, from all over the world, proves that Samih al-Qassim is alive in our national memory.
The evening included performances of poetry, music, and dance, and an exhibition of artwork inspired by the poet's pieces.
We're constantly approached by artists who want to use his poems, whether in works of art, music, or translation to foreign languages.
To honor his legacy, a short documentary was screened highlighting the national significance of his work.
On the first memorial of his passing, we're committed to keeping his legacy alive. He taught us to stand tall, and we will keep standing tall until his vision is completed.
Al-Qassim remains one of the most important Arab and Palestinian poets of contemporary times, having also written about Palestinian resistance and hardship. He passed away following a struggle with liver cancer on August 19th last year.
The first time I met him after his diagnosis, he asked me how much longer he had to live. It was a difficult moment. He had only 3 months or so according to his results, but he was braver and stronger than I expected, though he wasn't looking forward to the treatment. Fortunately, he was with us for another 3.5 years after that and published several more collections.
Al-Qassim was born in the Jordanian town of Al-Zarqa on May 11, 1939, to a Palestinian family from the Galilee. He was awarded several notable international awards, and his writing was translated and published widely around the world. He remains the most studied and researched Arab poet of his time. On the first memorial of his death, it was clear his writing lives on.
Well, now we're joined by our correspondent and author, Ayman Sikseck. Ayman, great to have you with us.
Good evening, David.
So let's talk about this poet for a moment here now. Get to the meat of it somewhat. He claims he was really influenced by 2 periods in his life, before and after the Six-Day War in 1967. Can you explain that?
That's right, yes. Well, Palestinian poets usually have to do with Palestinian narrative. And Palestinian narrative usually has to do with the Nakba in 1948. And this is something he was really curious and passionate about, writing and exploring. And he was, I would say, one of the dictators of what the Palestinian genre in writing was. He dictated an entire wave. He influenced an entire wave of writers who are interested in writing about the Nakba and the Palestinian existence in a certain way without symbolism, which was...
Would you argue he may have been the most influential of the writers? Or?
Well, he and Mahmoud Darwish belonged to the same time, but it's interesting to see the differences between them. While Darwish was more of a love poet, he considered himself a poet of love, Samih al-Qassim was more of a militant writer. And this is something he exercised in his own life as well. As a member of the Druze community, he was expected to enlisted the army at a certain age, but he refused and he went to jail for that. So he also really carried the burden of being the prominent political activist, which he was in his own life.
Speaking of being an activist, I know he was jailed at least multiple times?
That's right, that's right. So after the incident with not enlisting to the IDF, he joined the Communist Party. Now at the time, this was the only non-Zionist party in those years in Israel. That's how it was defined. And being part of the Communist Party was already in and of itself not exactly legal in Israel at the time, and they protested without permission several times. He was jailed several times. So he was one of the, I would say, last prominent Palestinian poets to actually be politically active in their own life and not just in writing.
Well, speaking of Palestinian literature here, stepping away from al-Qassim himself, literature within Palestinian society today, how strong of an influence is it? Is it popular today, or has it seen its better years?
Well, it's definitely seen its better years, at least in terms of publishing. There are no Palestinian publishing houses within Israel, obviously, for obvious reasons. So there's a lot less writing in Arabic, and it has a much smaller audience these days. So Arabic too, and I can say this about myself, people who grow up within Israel, especially in mixed cities, their Arabic is not as good as it used to be. Wow. So they can't read Samih al-Qassim the way their parents could, which is another thing that was lost when he was lost last year.
Are there other effects that you could name here of the sort of decline of literature now in Palestinian society? Is this left a void somewhat?
Well, I would say, you know, he grew up in a time where the struggle was apparent and obvious. It was very obvious what you had to write about, what you had to fight for. Everything was clear. Nowadays, for Palestinians and for Arab Israelis, it's not so clear-cut anymore. You're also Israeli, you're also an Arab. Fighting for one clear agenda is not the case anymore.
Is it still possible, or has it ever been possible, really, to separate the political narrative from the literature?
Well, not for Palestinian writers, I would say. The most prominent ones that we know of, Mahmoud Darwish and Samih al-Qassim, were very, very highly political, even though Darwish tried to step away from that, and he would get upset when people labeled him a political writer. He was a very, very political writer, and he influenced the generation of political writers, as did Samih al-Qassim.
Ayman Sikseck, very interesting as always. Appreciate you bringing your expertise, your personal expertise, to this story for us.
Thank you, David.